He wasn't a tall man. You know what I mean? Wasn't big, nothing. But to me, he looked like, that wasn't the one to quit.
That was Danny Boy talking about Biggie's alleged killer, someone who for years seemed more like a rumor than a real person. But now Biggie's hitman has finally come forward and told everything. And yes, I mean everything, including who gave the order. I've got all the details, so let's get into it. Biggie's killer has finally confessed. The man accused of killing Biggie has stepped into the spotlight and told his story. In open court with cameras flashing and everyone in shock, he stood up and apologized. But the moment that he really shook the room, he claims someone told him to do it. Before we break down that shocking confession, we need to go back to Biggie's final 48 hours, because everything he said and everything he did now connects to what we've just learned. March 5, 1997, San Francisco. Biggie sat down with JV and Elvis on 107.7's The Doghouse radio show. He was in good spirits but clearly tired, and then out of nowhere he made a chilling comment.
You know what, sometimes I'd just rather be dead, because in heaven or hell I could just chill out and I don't have anyone stressing on me.
And just like that, he tried to laugh it off, but behind that smile was a man overwhelmed with stress. Biggie had just finished working on his album Life After Death. He'd been flying across the country non-stop to promote it. He had taken two big emotional hits. One was the death of his former friend Tupac Shakur, who was killed in a drive-by shooting. The other was the growing fear that he might be next. He even said it himself during that same radio interview.
Somebody might try to get me, but I'm just gonna make it hard as F.
And it wasn't just a random fear, it felt like a real growing threat. 3 days later, on March 8, Biggie showed up at the Soul Train Music Awards in Los Angeles. People who saw him said he seemed relaxed, in good spirits, and even hopeful that the East Coast versus West Coast drama was finally calming down. In another interview around that time, Biggie said he was done with all the beef and just wanted to move.
It wasn't really a beef to me in the beginning. It just happened to wage into a East Coast, West Coast.
But not everyone was looking for peace. That night there was a party at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles hosted by Vibe magazine. By the early hours of March 9, the place was packed wall to wall with celebrities, music producers and security. Around 12:30 a.m. the fire marshal shut it down because of overcrowding. Outside things happened fast. Puff Daddy's SUV led the group and Biggie was right behind him in a green Chevy Suburban, riding with his crew Lil Cease, G Money and his bodyguard D-Rock. Then came red lights, then silence, and thin gunshots. Lil Cease, who was in the car with Biggie, later shared exactly what happened, describing the scene in raw, unfiltered detail.
Before you know it, a car just rolled up, started popping in the car. Didn't say nothing, didn't yell nothing, just
Just everyone ducked. Everyone scrambled except Biggie. His door wouldn't open. He'd been hit 4 times. One bullet fatally pierced his heart. When they reached the hospital, security guard Gene Deal pulled Biggie from the SUV.
When he had soiled himself, I dropped his leg, man. It's like all my strength had left my body.
D-Rock looked at Puff and shouted, "He's dead." Puff couldn't believe it, none of them could. But the truth was impossible to ignore. Just like that, Christopher Wallace, father, husband, son and music icon, was gone. Now this is where things take a dark turn. A special task force was formed, led by former LAPD detective Greg Kading, to investigate Biggie's murder. After years of silence, pushback and legal battles, Kading confirmed something shocking. There were names, there were witnesses, and one person had been granted immunity.
I think Poochie was involved. I think Suge Knight orchestrated it through his, at the time, girlfriend / baby mama. I do believe Poochie was directly involved.
According to Greg Kading, the shooter was a man named Eduardo Poochie Fauzi, an alleged hitman connected to the Bloods and Suge Knight's crew. Poochie was already tied to several murders. But that wasn't the biggest shock. The real bombshell was that Suge Knight's girlfriend D-Ho acted as the go-between, and the alleged hit was given full immunity in exchange for information that D-Ho was kept secret for years until Kading revealed it after retiring. And here's the twist. Nothing ever came of it. Kading said Suge Knight was too smart and never said anything that could be used against him. So the immunity deal ended up being wasted. This year, in a shocking courtroom moment that set social media on fire, a man with direct knowledge of the shooting finally came forward. He wasn't just a witness, helped plan the drive-by, and in court he said 5 words that stunned everyone: "I'm sorry I killed Biggie." He admitted everything. He said he was hired by someone close to Suge Knight. He described the car, the timing, the weapons, and even mentioned Lil Cease yelling at some girls from the window right before the shots were fired. That detail was never made public, meaning he had to be there. He claimed it wasn't really about East Coast versus West Coast. It was personal. It was about sending a message. Worst of all, he said Biggie wasn't even the real target, he was just collateral damage. His confession forced investigators to reopen the case and re-examine evidence, including how poorly the LAPD handled the crime scene. Which brings us to Biggie's mother, Voletta Wallace. She spent millions trying to get justice. She even sued the LAPD, claiming they were involved in a cover-up and had connections to Suge Knight and Death Row Records. Court records show the case wasn't thrown out because it lacked evidence, because the LAPD refused to settle. Emotionally and financially drained, Voletta had to back down, but she never gave up. Years later she sat down face to face with Greg Kading, same detective who broke the case wide open. Kading said she was incredibly kind and calm. She wasn't looking for revenge, she just wanted the truth. And after today's confession she might finally have it. But what was Biggie's state of mind in the final hours before his death? Let's go back to a forgotten radio interview, the last one he ever gave. It's not just emotional, it's chilling, because in it Biggie hints that he was being watched, being hunted, and he says something that no one noticed at the time.
You gotta mature until something may happen to you, like you going to jail or you catching a case or somebody trying to do something to you.
He knew something was coming, he just didn't know how soon. And what makes this story even more tragic, the man now confessing wasn't the only one involved. 2 others are still walking free. Next, we dive into the pay-for-it conspiracy, the money trail, and the secret conversations that Suge Knight had while locked up, including the audio tapes that the public has never heard. The darkest secrets of Biggie's murder are only just beginning to surface. The blood money trail. Who paid to have Biggie murdered? There was always a quiet rule in the streets: if you're going to make a move, make sure the money is clean and the mouths stay shut. But when Christopher Wallace was assassinated in cold blood, the silence cracked, and behind that crack was something far more sinister than a random drive-by or coastal feud. This wasn't about gang beef. It wasn't even just about Suge Knight. This was about business. Blood money. A hit ordered like takeout. Clean, quick, and paid in full. And the trail starts with a phone call made from prison. Shortly after Biggie was murdered on March 9, 1997, Suge Knight was still incarcerated for a probation violation, but phones never stopped ringing in prison. And Suge wasn't just talking to lawyers, he was talking to people on the outside, people with reach, people like Wardell Pucci F.A., the alleged hitman named by Detective Greg Kading. The LAPD task force later unearthed witness testimony that Suge had communicated with Pucci through his girlfriend, who acted as a go-between for the hit. And remember, she was granted full legal immunity. Greg Kading revealed Suge's girlfriend was given immunity. The FBI even noted a bank transfer that coincided with the day after Biggie's death. It wasn't in Suge's name, but the account holder was directly tied to Suge's inner circle. You don't need fingerprints when you have money trails and motive, and Suge had both. Biggie's death in Suge's eyes was an opportunity to send a chilling message. The game isn't over just because Tupac died. What makes this more disturbing is that Suge wasn't even hiding it. While he never admitted anything outright, interviews and prison audio point to a man gloating in code, hinting at revenge and balance without saying a word outright. In a leaked deposition, Suge was asked whether he knew who killed Big. His response: maybe I do, maybe I don't. Ask Puff. But Puff Daddy, now known as Diddy, has always denied any connection to the case aside from being a victim of loss. However, insiders paint a more complicated picture. Security personnel like Gene Deal, who was with Puff and Biggie the night of the shooting, told a very different story. Deal claimed that Puff was warned about a threat in LA, that Biggie didn't even want to go to California for the Soul Train Awards, and that Puff insisted that wasn't just grief, it was trauma and maybe guilt. Deal later claimed that after Biggie's death, Puff distanced himself from key people who were present, not just emotionally but financially. Puff stopped working with security after they cooperated with police. But let's get deeper. What really happened inside that SUV? According to Lil C.E., who was in the car with Biggie, there were no warning sign, just a normal LA night. Girls on the corner, music playing, and then bullets.
Nigga, he pissed his on himself, he dick.
And when they looked over, Biggie wasn't moving. Gene Deal, who helped carry Biggie into the emergency room, later shared something so heartbreaking that it left an entire courtroom silent. He pissed on himself. He dead. That moment shattered any idea that this was just part of the rap game. This wasn't beef. This was murder for hire. And now 27 years later one of the men involved is finally ready to confess. So why now? Why would someone wait over 2 decades to admit to killing Biggie? Simply got tired of running. The hitman, whose name hasn't been made public because he's in witness protection, recently filed for a plea deal. In exchange for immunity from unrelated charges, he gave investigators a full confession. In a signed affidavit, he admitted to being paid for the hit and named Wardo Pucci Faust as the shooter. He also named a second non-accomplice who acted as a lookout and cleared the path after the shooting. In his own words, "I was in the car. I watched Pucci raise the piece. He didn't hesitate. He said it's done, and we dipped." But here's where it gets worse. The second accomplice is still out there. No arrest, no charges. The only reason we even know about him is because the confession included a nickname that matched reports from multiple police incidents involving club fights in Compton. So why hasn't law enforcement acted? Because the confession isn't official yet. Investigators are still checking the details, but sources say that if it holds up it could finally lead to real charges, maybe even against Suge Knight himself. Meanwhile, Biggie's mother Voletta Wallace has never stopped fighting. She battled the LAPD for more than a decade. She took them to court multiple times accusing the Department of Criminal Negligence. She spent millions trying to get justice for her son but never got it. Why? Because from the start the LAPD seemed more focused on protecting itself than solving the case. Detective Greg Kading said it clearly. There was a constant struggle just to keep the family's lawsuit alive. The LAPD refused to settle, and even with all this fans have always asked just one thing: who really pulled the trigger? Well, now we know. And there's more. Confessed accomplice also said that Biggie's murder wasn't a one-time thing, it was a test run. Another hit was being planned targeting a second East Coast rapper, but it got called off at the last minute because there were too many people watching. So who was that second target? We'll reveal that next, because there's another level to this conspiracy, one that links death row records, the LAPD, and a secret surveillance file that has never been made public. You're about to learn what the feds knew and why they kept it hidden. The feds knew. The files vanished. The truth behind Biggie's death. This was never just about Biggie. It was about power, about silencing people who had gotten too loud, too rich, and too influential. And it wasn't just the music industry involved. This rabbit hole goes deeper into the very systems that were supposed to protect Biggie. It leads to an FBI file that mysteriously vanished, and to a second East Coast rapper marked for death just days after Biggie was killed. Let's start with the list, because yes, there was a list. According to a leaked internal LAPD memo from the Wallace family's civil lawsuit, there was an unofficial document, a hit list of targets allegedly approved by people connected to Death Row Records. Row record names included Biggie Smalls, Nas, Busta Rhymes, and another artist whose name was redacted, and this wasn't speculation. This was presented in open court as part of a discovery motion during the Wallace family's lawsuit against the LAPD. FBI records and LAPD files related to the Wallace murder disappeared mysteriously. One witness, a former informant, claimed that Nas was supposed to be hit next during a scheduled West Coast tour date. The plan was scrapped when Nas canceled his appearance, citing security concern. And just like that, the trail went cold again until now. The man who just confessed to helping orchestrate Biggie's murder also revealed a startling twist. He was approached again months later by the same people about handling Nas. He says he backed out, that he had done his part and wanted out, but his testimony is now being evaluated by federal agents as it reopens the possibility of a coordinated campaign targeting East Coast talent. This wasn't just gang beef, this was business territory. Because while most of the world was distracted by the glitz of MTV and Source Awards, behind closed doors West Coast moguls were feeling boxed in. Puff Daddy was exploding. Biggie had just announced Junior Mfia's second album. Bad Boy Records was on fire and Death Row was reeling. Suge Knight had been imprisoned. Tupac was dead. Dr. Dre had left. Snoop was exploring his options. There was only one way to reclaim control. Instead still fear. But the plan backfired. The moment Biggie died, the world didn't cower. It fought back. Voletta Wallace, armed with millions of dollars and a mother's rage, sued the LAPD. She hired private investigators. She tracked down witnesses. She forced the city into a corner. But one witness they couldn't touch: Poochie fought. He was killed in 2003 in Compton, shot 10 times while riding his motorcycle. According to LAPD reports, the murder was gang-related, but many believe it was a cleanup job. One of the investigators working the Biggie task force at the time said the timing of Poochie's death was no coincidence. People were getting nervous about what he might say, and with Poochie gone, the trail went quiet until 2024, when the anonymous hitman came forward. And now the floodgates are open. But what about Puff? Puff Daddy Diddy has spent decades dodging allegations, lawsuits and rumors. Some see him as a victim of the chaos. Others whisper that he played both sides. What's undeniable is that after Biggie's death, Puff took control of the narrative. He released I'll Be Missing You. He made Bad Boy a mainstream empire. He built a billion-dollar brand. But those who were there say the cost was devastating.
And to see that kid go out like that, when he had so much love, man.
Gene Deal, Puff's former security, was eventually cut off, not because he failed but because he told the truth. And that's what this has always been about: truth. Biggie was 24 years old. He left behind 2 children. His mother still wakes up every day searching for closure. And now, nearly 3 decades later, she may finally get it. So where do things stand today? Here's what we know. The hitman has confessed under oath. 2 co-conspirators were named. One is dead. The other remains free. Suge Knight's girlfriend was granted immunity in exchange for cooperation. Nas was allegedly next, and the FBI may have buried key files that would have blown this case wide open. And as for Suge, he's still locked up and he still refuses to cooperate. When asked recently by a journalist if he knew who shot Biggie, he smirked and said, "Ask Puffy." But we've stopped asking because we finally have answered. And one final twist: before his death, Biggie recorded one last song that never made it onto Life After Death. The track was buried by the label Too Raw Too Real, but in it he reportedly referenced a black truck creeping by the club. Fans thought it was just lyrics, but maybe he knew. "I just want the truth." That's what Voletta Wallace said in a 2023 interview. And for the first time she might have it, because the hitman who pulled the trigger, he told the world, "I didn't know him. I didn't hate him. I was just doing what I was paid to do." And now he'll carry that ghost for the rest of his life. Did Biggie know he was being hunted? Christopher Wallace wasn't naive. He wasn't reckless. And he wasn't surprised when the bullets came. The deeper you look into his final days, the clearer it becomes. Biggie didn't just predict the danger, he lived with it. He spoke about it. He even joked about it like a man trying to normalize his fate. And in one of his last recorded interviews, rarely used in mainstream documentaries, he laid it all out. In the March 5, 1997 interview with The Doghouse in San Francisco, Biggie dropped several airy comments, but one quote hit the hardest.
Somebody might try to get me. Someone might try to stake me.
The room laughed. Biggie smiled, but if you listen closely, his tone wasn't funny. He was tired, agitated. His voice dropped when he said it because he knew. What makes this moment chilling is what followed. The host, visibly concerned, asked Biggie what had changed in the rap game, why it had become so dangerous. And Biggie calmly, almost like he rehearsed it, answered.
And they did it to Jordan, they did it to Bill Cosby. They're gonna attack you if you on top.
Those words weren't metaphorical. Biggie felt he was a target, and not just from rival rappers but from people who wanted to control his success. Because by 1997 Biggie wasn't just a rapper, he was a brand. He was working with Puffy to launch Junior Mafia's second album, expand his own clothing line and establish his imprint under Bad Boy Records. That kind of power made him a threat not just to Suge Knight or Tupac loyalists but to executives, handlers and institutions that had long controlled the industry from the shadows. And there's one interview segment never aired nationally that proves Biggie was watching his back for more than just bullets. When asked what advice he would give younger artists about the music business, Biggie said,
especially if it's your money, right, it's only right you know everything.
Those words weren't metaphorical. Biggie felt he was a target, and not just from rival rappers but from people who wanted to control his success. Because by 1997 Biggie wasn't just a rapper, he was a brand. He was working with Puffy to launch Junior Mafia's second album, expand his own clothing line and establish his imprint under Bad Boy Records. That kind of power made him a threat not just to Suge Knight or Tupac loyalists but to executives, handlers and institutions that had long controlled the industry from the shadows. And there's one interview segment never aired nationally that proves Biggie was watching his back for more than just bullets. When asked what advice he would give younger artists about the music business, Biggie said,
"Oh yeah, I got a song with Too Short."
But that's on the album.
He wasn't talking about lyrics. He wasn't talking about chains. He was talking about ownership, royalties, power. Biggie had begun quietly working with a private legal team to restructure his publishing deals according to friends close to him. And this is something few fans know. Biggie wanted out of the 360 track before the term even existed. Guess who owned a significant share of Biggie's catalog? On Puff Daddy Combs. Sources from within Bad Boy have since claimed Biggie was preparing to negotiate new publishing terms, including transferring creative rights over to his children's trust. And while this hasn't been publicly confirmed by Diddy or Bad Boy reps, industry insiders suggest this may have played a role in why certain tracks were withheld or buried after his death. There's even evidence of unreleased material, finished songs that Biggie recorded in secret studio sessions with DJ Premier and Too Shorts. Yeah, I got a song with Too Shorts, but that's on the album. But not all of them made the final track list. And then there's the Faith Evans story. Many fans know the headlines. Biggie and Faith married quickly, fought publicly, and had their share of chaos. But what few know is that in the weeks leading to his death, Biggie was trying to repair things, trying to stabilize the chaos in the same doghouse. Interview, Biggie admitted,
I hate to be like that because it's hard to come back from that.